Okay, let's jump right into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are unpacking a seriously fascinating and honestly highly complex situation. Right now, as we speak, there is a massive geopolitical clash happening over municipal solid waste. I mean, we are literally talking about garbage flowing between Canada and the United States. It's a crisis involving high-stakes trade agreements in Washington, aggressive domestic policies, and billions of dollars. But what is truly incredible about this story is the solution. As you'll see, the way out of this international chaos isn't coming from some boardroom. It's actually being solved right at the construction site using a smartphone and edge AI. To really grasp the scale of this crisis, you have to think about this stark number: 3.46 million tons. That is the staggering amount of municipal solid waste, or MSW, that Michigan imports from the province of Ontario every single year. It's not a temporary thing either. It is a massive, structural, logistical pipeline that's existed for decades, physically moving thousands of trucks across the border to empty Ontario's trash into American landfills. And this brilliantly illustrates just how deep that dependency goes. Ontario's exports represent nearly 15%, 14.35% to be exact, of all waste disposed of in Michigan landfills year to date. So this isn't just a casual trading relationship. This is a deeply entrenched binational waste corridor. So the big question is, what happens when that established corridor suddenly gets threatened by international trade wars? Well, here is our roadmap to figure that out. We're going to cover 1. The geopolitical trash war. 2. Ontario's capacity squeeze. 3. The Sentient Bridge. 4. Pixel 10 Pro AI verification. 5. The digital refinery workflow. And 6. Leading the circular bioeconomy. All right, part 1. The geopolitical trash war, focusing on the USMCA and tariffs. Let's start by looking at the macro-level triggers here, because the cross-border flow of MSW between Washington and Canada has recently been completely weaponized. It turned a standard logistical challenge into a full-blown crisis, and the timeline is absolutely critical. In early 2025, the Trump administration initiated significant trade war threats against Canada, which specifically included credible threats to block or slap heavy tariffs on Canadian garbage shipments. Then, fast forward to July of 2026, and the United States officially declined to extend the USMCA, which is known as CUSMA up in Canada, for another 16-year block. That threw the entire trade pact into a state of mandatory annual reviews and deep, deep uncertainty. And because Ontario relies so heavily on those Michigan landfills, analysts immediately sounded the alarm. They warned that if the border closes or tariffs make export too expensive, Ontario's domestic landfill capacity will be completely exhausted by 2034. That rapidly compressed capacity cliff is exactly why officials are treating this as a national security-level crisis. Which brings us to part 2, Ontario's capacity squeeze and those border bottlenecks. So, with the international border suddenly acting as a major bottleneck, we really have to zoom in and look at how regional politicians are aggressively responding to the squeeze on both sides. Over on the U.S. side, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer is actively pushing to deter Canadian imports. See, Michigan has historically charged an anomalously low tipping fee of just 36 cents per ton, essentially making it a cheap dumping ground. Governor Whitmer has proposed a massive 1,000% hike, raising that fee to $5 a ton to fund local cleanups and price out foreign trash. Meanwhile, on the Canadian side, Ontario Premier Doug Ford is staring down that 2034 capacity cliff. In response, his administration has leaned into aggressive environmental deregulation, which critics have certainly called controversial, passing things like Bill 5 to fast-track domestic landfill expansions and bypass those lengthy environmental assessments. But here's the thing. Building new landfills takes a decade, right? So Ontario is also enforcing strict diversion tactics through something called the CIRCL levy, which is a domestic waste tax. This regulation heavily penalizes mixed waste, escalating the cost towards $60 per ton by 2036. However, if you can prove your waste is clean, separated wood, the levy drops dramatically to just $5 per ton. So if you're a general contractor today, mixing your waste is literally a path to absolute financial ruin. You have to separate it. Let's move to part 3, the Sentient Bridge and using AI as a compliance moat. Okay, let's really dive into this part, because this is where the story pivots from a massive, abstract political problem to a highly targeted, localized technological solution. Enter a company called 95 Wood, Now, 9-5 Wood doesn't operate like your traditional waste hauler at all. They operate what they call a digital refinery. They act as this sentient bridge. Instead of just throwing everything into a landfill, they take chaotic construction waste and convert it into verified, high-purity, clean wood. This wood is then used as feedstock for the lucrative pyrogenic biocarbon market, which is essentially superheating organic matter to capture carbon. And dealing exclusively with wood isn't some limitation of their business model. No, it is a highly calculated financial moat. I love how they phrase it. Wood only isn't a limitation, it's the moat. By strictly dealing in clean wood, 905 Wood helps general contractors entirely avoid that punitive $60 per ton mixed waste levy we were just talking about. And that precise focus translates to massive savings. We are talking specifically about $1,034 saved on every single mothership load of waste they haul. Contractors are more than happy to pay premium for this service because it legally and cleanly bypasses all the tariff chaos and domestic levies. But the absolute key to making this whole thing work is proving the wood is actually clean before it ever gets on the truck. That takes us to Part 4, Pixel 10 Pro AI verification and the Edge AI stack. To prove the wood is clean, we have to zoom all the way down from the macro geopolitics of Washington down to the microchip level, right at the construction job site, just to look at the exact hardware making this verification possible. And this is where it gets incredibly cool. 95 Wood has operationalized commercial smartphones to act as actual edge computing classification systems. Specifically, their drivers use the Google Pixel 10 Pro running Android 16. By utilizing the Light-RT AI stack, they run a 2.3 billion parameter edge AI model called Gemma for E2B directly on the device itself. When a driver points their phone at a dumpster bin, the AI visually classifies the wood, separating clean wood from treated or contaminated wood in under 500 milliseconds. It happens instantly, right there at the source. But what if the AI isn't sure? Compliance is literally everything here, so they implemented the E4B visual fallacy guard. If the AI's confidence drops below 85%, which they call the amber band, it forces a dual model consensus to guarantee accuracy. If there's still ambiguity after that, the precautionary principle kicks in, and the load is automatically rejected. The smartphone is essentially acting as a miniature preemptive border patrol. This strict on-site digital verification ensures that a contaminated load never even begins the journey, completely insulating the shipment from border rejections or any compliance failures down the line. Moving on to Part 5, the digital refinery workflow, going from RFQ straight to PDF. Let's transition over to see how this complex tech is actually applied in a seamless daily business process through their UI and UX design. The digital refinery application workflow is just incredibly elegant. It starts with Step 1, an AI-driven intake that generates a structured request for quote, or RFQ, locking in the pricing. Step 2 is the physical pickup, where that Pixel 10 Pro and the Light-RT AI stack classify the wood directly at the bin. And finally, Step 3 is the automated PDF output. The system instantly generates the necessary OREG 347 domestic compliance reports for Ontario, and crucially, it generates a signed certificate of origin, which is required for USMCA cross-border compliance. The contractor just gets an audit-proof paper trail delivered seamlessly. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how this digital workflow completely reshapes the economics of waste. Looking at 905 Wood's canonical pricing card, because they are meticulously separating clean wood at the source using their AI workflow, they don't have to pay to dump it at a traditional transfer station at all. They bypass the landfill entirely and ship these high-value loads direct to biohubs. This diversion cuts their disposal costs drastically. It allows them to offer highly competitive pricing to contractors while still generating massive load values, like we're talking over $8,000 for a 144-yard mothership load. And finally, Part 6, leading the circular bioeconomy. Let's zoom back out to the macro level to see how this micro workflow connects to a much, much larger global industrial strategy. Just look at the financial impact across a fleet. For a company moving 200 loads a week, the annual cost of the Circle levy on mixed waste would be nearly $12 million. But by using Edge AI to guarantee clean, amber-classified wood, that cost drops to under $2 million. That is almost $10 million in pure savings, not even mentioning the carbon dividend tracking that yields further offsets. By operationalizing these digital tools to transform chaotic waste into verified feedstock, 95 Wood isn't just surviving the Ontario-Michigan waste crisis, they are actively securing Ontario's leadership in the global circular bioeconomy. So, what does this all mean? It leaves us with a truly fascinating question to consider. As environmental regulations tighten and trade pacts like the USMCA becoming increasingly volatile, will digital verification and Edge AI essentially outmaneuver political trade wars? In the future of the global bioeconomy, an AI model classifying resources right at the source might just be the ultimate border wall. It's a pretty powerful thought, and definitely something to keep a close eye on as this industry evolves.